This happened just a few weeks ago. I'm 32, and I took a night shift nursing job at the old hospital in town. I had worked night shifts before, but this one felt different. The building had a strange atmosphere that I can't quite explain. The floors were worn, and the flickering lights gave off a weird buzz. I felt anxious on my first night, but I thought maybe it was just the pressure of the new job. I've never stopped thinking about it. The night seemed normal at first. I did my rounds, checked on patients, and listened to the machines beep softly. It was around 3 a.m. when I began to hear something. It was faint, just whispers echoing down the hall. I thought maybe it was just my tired mind. I brushed it off. But the noise stayed with me. I told myself it was nothing, just the building settling. Still, I could feel something strange in my gut. As the nights passed, the whispers grew louder. They carried a sense of urgency, like pieces of conversations. Sometimes it seemed like I could catch a name or a plea for help, but it was never clear. Each time I heard it, my heart raced. One night, I saw a shadow darting at the edge of my vision. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but it happened more than once. I didn't mention any of this to the other nurses. They'd probably think I was just tired. One patient caught my attention. Every night, he would sit up and stare at the same corner of the room, his eyes wide and unblinking. I tried to engage him, but he wouldn't respond. It was like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I felt a chill when I learned about the hospital's history. A child had died years ago under tragic circumstances. Maybe it was their voice I was hearing. I thought about it a lot. Then came the night when I heard distinct words. "Help me." It came from the shadows at the end of the hall. The hair on my arm stood up, and I felt cold, like I had walked into a freezer. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I took a deep breath and moved forward, but as I got closer, the voice faded. I stopped outside the door, breathing heavily. The patient was staring at that corner again. He looked terrified, so I asked if he was okay, but he didn't answer. He just kept staring. Suddenly, I heard it again, clearer this time, just behind me. "Help me." I turned around, heart pounding. There was nothing there. I wasn't sure what to think. What were those voices trying to tell me? Were they warnings, or just memories trapped in the walls? I could feel a knot in my stomach. That old hospital got to me in ways I couldn't explain. Even now, I wonder if I'll find out someday what those voices wanted. The next night, I punched in at the front desk, feeling that familiar mix of dread and curiosity. Would the whispers return? I braced myself as I made my way down the dimly lit hall. Everything felt heavier tonight, like the air itself was charged with something I couldn't understand. As I made my rounds, the quietness of the hospital seemed louder than ever. No machines beeped, no footsteps echoed, just a stillness that sat on my shoulders. I passed by the patient who had been staring into the corner. He was still awake, eyes fixed forward. I wanted to ask him what he saw, but I hesitated. There was a look of understanding in his gaze, one that unnerved me. Then I heard it. Soft at first, the whispers began again. "Help me." My breath caught in my throat. It came from somewhere deep in the shadows. I turned, scanning the hall, but there was no one there. The rustling of fabric drew my attention, and I looked back at the patient. To my shock, he had turned his body toward me, his lips moving as if he were trying to speak. "Please," he whispered, voice barely audible. "What do you need?" I pressed, feeling a chill creep over my skin. But he went silent, staring past me again with wide eyes, and that knot in my stomach twisted tighter. I glanced down the hall, and my heart sank. The shadow didn't just flit at the edge of my vision anymore. It was full-bodied and distinct at the far end of the corridor. It felt like it was watching me. "Hello?" I called out, trying to stay calm. My voice shook. There was no answer, only the whispers, louder now, weaving snatches of conversation. It felt like they were coming from the walls themselves. They spoke with urgency, growing increasingly frantic. I felt my pulse quickening. Taking a deep breath, I approached the end of the hall, compelled to know what was waiting in the darkness. My feet felt heavy. I reached the door of a room I hadn't entered before. It was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open. Inside, the light flickered, and I felt the air grow colder. Then everything shifted. The whisper stopped. It felt like the room was holding its breath. I stepped in, scanning the empty space. Just darkness and dust. But then I noticed something else. A small object on the floor, just by the bed. I bent down to pick it up. A doll, tattered and worn, with one eye missing. When I touched it, a loud crash echoed from behind me, like someone had slammed a door. I whipped around, heart racing, but the only sound now was the thumping of my own heart in my ears. I dropped the doll and ran, fear gnawing at me. I had to escape the whispers, the shadows, the overwhelming sense of dread. The night felt endless, creeping around me like a predator. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had uncovered something deeper, something I wasn't prepared for. And as I fled, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if the whispers were meant for me? The din of the hospital faded behind me as I sped down the hall. The whispers grew fainter, but the unease lingered, trailing like a shadow. I wanted to shake off the fear, convince myself that I was overreacting. But with every step, that doll felt like a curse, and I couldn't stop thinking about the patient's eyes. I needed to find someone, anyone, who could make sense of whatever was going on. As I reached the nurse's station, I nearly collided with Jenna, the night shift nurse. Her messy bun and tired smile usually offered comfort, but tonight they felt thin and strained. "Hey, you look shaken. Everything all right?" she asked. "No," I blurted out. "There was a doll, and—"
"Stop. Just take a breath." Her voice was calm, cutting through my panic. I did as she said, but the images of the doll and the shadow loomed large in my mind. What's happened?
"I heard the whispers again," I murmured, glancing toward the hall I had just fled. "The patient, he was trying to say something, and then I found this doll in a room." Jenna's expression shifted. She glanced over her shoulder, and I followed her gaze. The hall seemed to stretch ahead into darkness, as if it could swallow us whole. "We need to check it out," she replied, her voice steadier than mine. Before I could protest, she walked toward the room. My feet felt rooted to the spot, but curiosity pulled me to her side. I couldn't let her face this alone, even if my heart pounded violently against my ribs. As we stepped into the room, the flickering light greeted us. I scanned the space, expecting to find some lingering specter. My eyes landed on the spot where I'd found the doll, but it was gone. "I swear it was right here," I said, voice trembling.
Jenna frowned. "This room hasn't been used in a while. I don't like it."
Just as she spoke, a chill swept through the room. It was immediate and sharp, bringing goosebumps to my skin. I heard it, a faint whisper rising above the silence, strong enough to send fear bubbling in my stomach. "Help me, help me." "It's back," I breathed, my words barely escaping my lips. I felt sweat trickle down my spine. "Let's get out of here," Jenna said urgently. But as we turned, the door slammed shut, the sound echoing like thunder. I gasped. It wasn't just fear now, it was terror pulling at my insides. The whispers grew louder, swirling around us, but I couldn't make out the words. Panic set in. I rattled the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. "Why won't it open?" I cried. Jenna's face was pale, and her hands shook as she continued to pull at the knob. Then a low voice broke through the whispers. "You shouldn't be here." I froze, dread pooling in my gut. Someone was in the room with us. But where? I turned slowly, eyes darting for any sign of movement. That's when I saw it, just for a moment. A figure, partially obscured by shadows, standing in the corner. I squinted, trying to see clearly, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Did you see that?" I gasped, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. Jenna nodded, eyes wide.
"Get ready to run," she whispered.
The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, drowning out everything else. We were no longer just fighting for answers. Now, it felt like we were fighting for our lives. The whispers grew stronger, and I felt their urgency pressing against my eardrums. Fear coursed through me as I turned to Jenna. Her eyes were wide, mirroring the wild panic I felt inside. She grabbed my wrist, and I felt the heat of her grip. "On 3, she said. 1, 2. Before she could finish, I heard a faint giggle piercing through the chaos. It was haunting and childlike, sending an icy shiver down my spine. "What was that?" I whispered, clutching her arm tighter. "I don't know," she replied, her voice trembling. "But we need to move, now." With one swift motion, she slammed against the door, her shoulder colliding with it. The whispering morphed into unintelligible murmurs, becoming a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the very walls. I joined her, banging my palm against the door. It didn't budge. My breath quickened, panic rising like bile in my throat. I stepped back, desperately looking around the dim room for something, anything that could help us escape. "The window!" I shouted, pointing toward the far side. It was a small pane, but it might be our only chance. Jenna followed my gaze, and we rushed toward it, the wood floor creaking beneath our feet as if warning us to stop. Just as we reached the window, a cold gust of air swept through the room, snuffing out the flickering light above. Darkness pressed in like a living thing. I felt Jenna's hands slip from mine in the blackness, and I caught a sharp intake of breath from her. "Jenna," I called out, my heart racing. I didn't know if she was close or far away. Every instinct screamed to get out, but I couldn't abandon her. "Where are you?" "I'm here," she replied, her voice a mere whisper. I felt my way through the pitch-black space, my fingers brushing against the rough walls. "I can't see anything." Suddenly, I heard the giggle again. This time it was louder, more distinct, and it felt like it was directly behind me. I spun around, heart pounding in my chest. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking. "Help me," the voice echoed, sounding like a child lost and alone. It was both a plea and a command. My breath caught in my throat. I was half tempted to answer, to turn and search the darkness for the source, but a primal instinct urged me to run. "I can't take this." Panic swelled in my chest like a balloon ready to burst. I grabbed the edge of the window frame, and with a shove, I tried to push it open. It jostled, but didn't yield. "It won't budge." "Keep trying. We have to get out," Jenna cried, her voice edged with fear. The giggling now became a chorus, surrounding us, relentless and mocking. "I think I felt something," Jenna said suddenly, and I turned toward her voice, reaching out for her. The mere thought of being submerged in darkness without her was unnerving. Just as I grasped her arm, the whispers coalesced into a recognizable phrase, clear and sharp. "You shouldn't have come here." I froze as realization washed over me. Something wanted us trapped. Trapped like the spirits of the past. My blood ran cold. "We're not alone," I whispered. Then I noticed the floor. Something was shimmering in the dim shadows. A hint of pale light caught my eye. "What is—" An unexpected crash outside the window shattered my thought. The glass was gone in an instant, and a figure emerged from the stormy night. It stood tall, shrouded in darkness, features indistinguishable. Jenna grabbed my hand, her grip tightening. "We have to jump or wait for it." But as I looked back, the room trembled and the shadows surged. We didn't have much time. "On 3, I said, my voice shaky yet firm. 1, 2. As I prepared to leap into the unknown, a scream echoed through the room, drowning out everything. My heart dropped. I realized we were far from done with whatever had just begun. The scream faded, leaving an eerie silence that was just as unsettling. I felt Jenna's hand slip from mine as I jumped. My feet hit the ground, knees buckling slightly upon impact. I looked up to see her still in the window frame, hesitation in her eyes. "Jenna, come on," I hissed, glancing back at the dark room. It felt alive, willing us to stay. The whispers were clawing at the edges of my sanity, but my plea didn't reach her. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "I think we need to go back in." "Are you crazy?" I fired back, looking up at the open window where darkness churned like a storm. "We need to run." Just then, the figure outside moved, revealing an indistinct shape cloaked in shadowy outlines. It was neither human nor creature, just wrong. The moment it turned toward us, the air grew heavy, suffocating. "Get down!" I pushed Jenna to the ground as a gust of cold wind whipped past us, almost tearing the breath from my lungs. The whispers intensified into a cacophony of voices, angry, urgent, filled with torment. My heart raced, a drum echoing in my ears. Suddenly, I saw it. The shimmering glow from the floor, brighter now, coalesced into a swath of light. It was not just a reflection, it seemed to pulse, beckoning us closer. My instinct was to run, but my feet felt planted. "Over here!" Jenna shouted, pointing to the strange light. "It could be an exit." "Are you sure?" I hesitated, torn between battling the shadows closing in and the hope that this light offered. But as I turned my gaze back to the figure, I froze again. It was closer now, a distorted face forming within the mass. The finality of a child's laugh crept back, echoing the same haunting call from before. "Help me!" If we hesitated any longer, we might be devoured by what lay behind us. "Trust me," I said, sprinting toward the glow on the floor. Jenna followed, and I could feel her panic merging with my own, the weight of our fear pressing against my chest. The whispers grew louder, screaming warnings I couldn't decipher. The ground beneath us trembled, disintegrating with each step taken toward the light. What if it's a trap?
"Jenna!" cried out, but we had no time for a debate. "Whatever this is, we need to face it," I replied, grabbing her arm and pulling her along. As we reached the edge of the illumination, a sudden jolt sent us tumbling forward. We landed hard, and everything went dark again. Time felt suspended in that moment, but I could still hear it, the faint laughter, the cries, and underneath, a voice commanding, "Stay." Then, as if the universe recoiled, a blinding flash exploded around us, followed by absolute silence. My heart raced, pounding in my chest, as I felt a weight push down on my shoulders. When I opened my eyes again, we were no longer in the room. But where were we? I sat up slowly, Jenna beside me, both of us on a cold tile floor. The air was thick with a sense of dread. "What just happened?" Jenna whispered, her voice trembling. I turned to her. "I don't know." That's when I heard it, the faint, echoing giggle again, now sounding closer than before, followed by that same plea, "Help me." A shiver ran down my spine as realization sank in. Whatever had called out, whatever was chasing us, wasn't finished yet. And it might have an agenda that would put us in much deeper trouble than we ever anticipated. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of confusion. The cold tiles beneath me felt like ice. Whatever had happened, it hadn't been kind. "Where are we?" Jenna said, pushing herself up beside me. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. I scanned the room. It looked abandoned. Stacks of old medical equipment, faded posters on the wall, and a single flickering fluorescent light overhead that buzzed like 1,000 angry bees. "I think we're in a hospital," I replied, swallowing hard, "but it looks like no one's been here in years." The giggle floated through the air again, a ghostly taunt. "Help me." The whisper seemed to echo directly off the walls. "Did you hear that?" Jenna asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," I said, pushing myself to my feet, both anxious and compelled. I felt the weight of those words hanging in the air, wrapping around us like an invisible chain. "We have to find the source." She stood up cautiously, looking around. "What if it's a trap?" "Whatever it is, I'd rather confront it than sit here doing nothing." I stepped further into the room, my shoes squeaking against the tiles. Each step felt like a countdown. As we moved deeper into the space, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The shadows danced along the walls. I caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, but they vanished when I turned my head. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the other side of the room, making us both jump. "What was that?" Jenna gasped. "I don't know, but we should check it out," I said, my heart pounding harder in my chest. The urge to flee tugged at me, but I forced myself forward, toward the source of the noise. We reached a heavy door marked morgue. The sound had come from inside.
I pushed it open slowly, trying to muffle the creak of the hinges. Light poured in from a shattered window, casting jagged shadows on the cold, stainless steel gurneys, remnants of what had once been. "What are we doing?" Jenna whispered, fear lacing her tone. "Looking for answers," I replied. My voice trembled, unsure if I believed my own words. The metallic scent of decay hit me hard. I stepped into the room, scanning the area. The air felt charged, heavy with something unnameable. Do you think—" "Look," Jenna interrupted, pointing toward the far wall. A silhouette stood there, shrouded in darkness. It was blurred and incomplete, but it felt alive. "Who's there?" I called out, my instinct to confront this presence forcing my feet to move forward. But as the figure appeared to shift, I froze. The giggle rang out again, sounding taunting and familiar. "Help me!" And that's when I saw it. A small hand reaching out from the shadows, fingers brushing against the light. The child's face came into view then, a hauntingly beautiful visage that twisted into a frown, eyes pleading. "Get back!" I shouted, grabbing Jenna's arm. The moment I did, the lights flickered violently before plunging us into darkness once more. Panic surged. I felt her grip tighten on me as we stood in the black void, unable to see even a foot in front of us. Then, someone whispered my name. "Let's get out of here!" Jenna pulled at me, her voice desperate. As I turned to run, the laughter filled the space again, echoing ominously. Whatever was in this place wasn't going to let us go that easily, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to uncover something far worse than we'd already faced. The darkness swallowed us, thick and suffocating. I felt Jenna's breath hitch beside me as she clutched my arm. All I could hear was the rapid thump of my heartbeat and that haunting giggle echoing in the silence. "Where do we go?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just follow me," I said, forcing my legs to move. I couldn't stay in place like a deer in headlights. The shadows seemed to shift and pulse around us. Each step felt wrong, but I couldn't let fear paralyze me. We stumbled through the darkness, taking careful steps until I felt the edge of the morgue doorframe. I swung it open and let the dim light from outside spill into the room. Nothing looked different, yet the oppressive feeling only deepened. I could almost taste the tension in the air. "Do you think it's gone?" Jenna asked, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "I don't know. It could be anywhere." I peered into the dark corner where I had last seen the figure. I took a step forward and squinted. Nothing, just more empty space. In that moment of quiet, there was a soft scuffling sound coming from an adjacent room.
It was deliberate, like something was shifting, or someone was trying to conceal their presence. My skin prickled. "Did you hear that?" I asked, moving closer to the door that led to the sound. Jenna nodded, her eyes wide. "Maybe we should leave," she said, but I knew we couldn't go without knowing what was lurking in that space. I steeled myself and pushed the door open, leading Jenna into a dimly lit hallway. The walls were peeling, and the stench of mildew hung thick. I glanced down the corridor. Doors lined each side, their labels worn and difficult to read. The whispers were quieter now, more like a breeze passing through, yet the chilling sensation of being watched still lingered. "Let's check one of the rooms," I suggested, my voice shaky but firm. I moved toward the first door on the right. It swung open on rusty hinges, creaking loudly. Inside, I could see old equipment and broken furniture. My heart raced as I searched the area, hoping to find answers. When I turned back to Jenna, her face was pale, her eyes fixed on something behind me. I followed her gaze. On the wall opposite us hung something that shouldn't be there, a child's drawing, visibly recent in this derelict place. It depicted stick figures in a hospital, but the colors were eerily bright. What struck me most was the caption scrawled at the bottom in uneven handwriting. "Help us." "Who did this?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know." My stomach dropped as I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "But we need to go, now." Just as I turned to lead Jenna away, another loud crash erupted from a room further down the corridor, followed by a scream that sent my heart into my throat. "Did you hear that?" Jenna's eyes were wide and terrified. "Yes," I muttered, inching backward towards the exit. "Let's get out of here. Whatever is happening, we don't want to find out." But as we stepped away from the room, a sharp chill wrapped around us. Someone, or something, was blocking our way back. The laughter came again, sharper, closer, filling the space with an urgency that pushed us forward despite the fear gripping us. That's when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't just the shadows that were shifting anymore. It was something alive. Whispers filled the air again, increasing in volume until they drowned out my own thoughts. I turned toward Jenna, ready to reassure her, but the panic in her eyes told me there was something I still hadn't seen, something looming just behind us. Before I could make sense of it, I felt a sudden pull at my shirt. The laughter crescendoed into a chilling symphony, drowning everything else out. We had to run. We dashed down the corridor as if the ground were on fire, my desperate breaths mingling with Jenna's frantic gasps. The laughter echoed all around us, a twisted melody that seemed to chase us, wrapping around us like tendrils of smoke. I didn't dare look back. I simply focused on the light at the end of the hallway, the promise of safety just out of reach. Suddenly, I felt a sharp jolt of pain as my arm was yanked. I stumbled, veering off the path towards a doorway we hadn't passed before. I barely registered the name on the door, Room 302. It swung open before I could stop myself, and I felt Jenna's grip tighten as she was pulled in with me. The room was small and dirty, filled with dusty furniture and cabinets lined against the walls. In the center, a metal examination table stood ominously under a flickering bulb. I shivered as our eyes swept the space, the feeling of being trapped creeping in. I could hear the laughter getting closer, growing louder. "Close the door," Jenna urged, her voice capitalizing on panic. I stumbled backwards, blindly shutting the door and turning the lock with trembling hands. "Do you think it saw us?" I asked, my mind swirling in a haze. "I don't think it's over," Jenna whispered, her voice shaking. She pointed to the far wall, and my breath caught in my throat. Another drawing hung there, this one darker, more disturbing. A scene of anguish, with distorted figures reaching out as if begging for help. The words etched into the paper sent a chill racing down my spine. "We can't leave."
This can't be real, I muttered, my mind racing to find a logical explanation. But with each beat of silence that followed, the laughter outside morphed into a cacophony of voices, all too familiar, echoing our own fears, our own memories. We stepped back instinctively as the door rattled. I held my breath, heart hammering in my chest. "Let's find another way out," Jenna said, her voice feeble but edged with determination. I nodded, but deep down, a sinking dread told me there might not be another way. I scanned the room, searching for an exit. My eyes landed on a narrow window, partially covered by grime. It was shut tight, the rusted frame barely able to budge. Before I could voice my thoughts, another loud bang resounded against the door. I staggered away, adrenaline soaking through my veins. The voices transformed into a united chant, growing louder and more frenzied, drowning out my thoughts. It was a mix of laughter and cries, cries for help. My stomach twisted at the idea that maybe the echoes were living memories of regret and despair from those trapped before us. Jenna pulled me toward the exit once again. "We have to go, now." I turned toward the door, expecting it to hold, bracing myself for the impossible. But as I gripped the handle, a flash of white blurred my vision. Then everything fell silent. The moment hung heavy. Just as I thought we might be safe, I saw it, an outline beyond the glass, a figure standing still, staring at us with eyes that seemed to shine. A cold terror coiled around my heart as I realized that we weren't alone after all. Then the whispers returned. The whispers were no longer just a faint murmuring. They had grown into a haunting chorus, swirling around us like a storm. I pressed my palms against my ears, as if that could drown them out. But the voices were relentless, each one layered with fear and confusion. They echoed thoughts I had buried, fears I thought I had long forgotten. Jenna's breathing quickened beside me. "We need to get out of here," she hissed, scanning the room frantically. I nodded, trying to focus. The figure at the window was still there, motionless, its gaze fixated on us. I took a cautious step closer, the floor creaking under my weight. Whatever it was, it seemed to radiate an unnatural energy. I felt drawn to it, curiosity mixed with sheer terror. "Don't!" Jenna grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "It could be a trap." The whispers seemed to intensify at her words, rising in pitch until they became a cacophony. "Help us! Let us go! You don't understand!" It was as if the room itself cried out in anguish. I blinked, fighting to clear my head. "Maybe it's trying to warn us," I said, though my voice trembled. "Maybe it knows what we're dealing with. Or maybe it wants to keep us here," she shot back, her eyes wide with fear. My stomach twisted. The door continued to rattle, relentless as the pounding just outside. I glanced back at the window. The figure had moved closer, pressing against the glass, a face now forming in the shadows. It was a girl, her features obscured by grime, but there was something familiar in her expression, a pleading, desperate look that made my chest ache. "No, I can't," I whispered, shaking my head. "We have to find a way out." I turned to the only available option, the cabinet against the far wall. It was old and worn, but it might hide something that could help us. Jenna joined me, her fingers brushing against the dusty surface. "What if it's locked?" she asked, biting her lip. "Then we break it," I replied, adrenaline surging. I shoved the cabinet hard, and it jolted slightly, the old wood groaning in protest. "Help me," I said, and together we pushed against it. The cabinet lurched, revealing more dust and darkness, but no sign of a key or anything useful. I could hear the laughter outside shift into something more sinister, echoing off the walls. I felt my heart race again. Suddenly, the door slammed open. My body tensed as a figure stood framed in the doorway, silhouetted by the light behind. The laughter stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. It was the same outline, but this time clearer, more menacing. I could see a twisted smile on its lips. "Are you looking for a way out?" it taunted, voice low and laced with malice. The whispers grew frenzied again, urging us not to listen, not to trust. My body screamed to run. That's when I saw it, on the floor, a key glinting under the flickering light, just within reach. But I knew one thing for certain: picking it up might seal our fate. I stared at the key, its metallic gleam almost beckoning. The figure at the door watched with unnerving patience, its twisted smile widening as if it knew my thoughts.
I blinked, torn between the possibility of freedom and the gnawing dread that gripped my chest. "Jenna, what should we do?" I whispered, my throat tight. She stood beside me, trembling, her gaze shifting between the doorway and the key. I don't know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we can't stay trapped here." The laughter began again, a chilling symphony of voices rising like a storm. "Help us! Let us go!" they cried, but they felt sinister now, turned against us. I could almost feel the weight of those desperate demands pressing down, and a sinking realization hit me. I was being tempted into a trap. "Just get the key," the figure urged, stepping closer, shadows twisting around it. "I can help you. Just open the door and follow me." "Stop!" I shouted, the word bursting from my lips as panic surged. The figure paused, but the whispers raged on, swelling with urgency. "Don't listen to it." I turned to Jenna, feeling the fear radiate from her. "We need to get to the exit. This whole place is trying to captivate us." "Then let's get out," she insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. I could feel the floor vibrating beneath my feet, rumbling like the echoes of restless souls. The key still glinted, but I took a step back, my instinct screaming not to engage. We needed to find another way out, one not dictated by whatever malevolent force was in the room with us. "Let's check another room," I suggested, gripping her arm. Jenna nodded, urgency pulling us both. We skirted past the figure, which stood still, almost anticipating our next move. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar as we dashed through the door, heart pounding, lungs burning. As we navigated the dim hallway, flashes of light illuminated fleeting shadows. Familiar terror surged through me as the whispers chased us. "Help me! Help us! You shouldn't have come back!" The voices were everywhere, ricocheting off the walls, casting a web of fear around us. "We can't let it catch us," Jenna pressed, pulling me forward. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure spring to life. Instead, we plunged deeper into the corridor, searching for any semblance of hope. Then came the sound, the piercing giggle again, echoing from a room marked recovery. Jenna and I exchanged glances, the fear reflected in our eyes. "Should we check?" I asked, my heart pounding. "We need to keep moving," she urged, but curiosity tugged at me. What if someone needed our help? "Just for a second," I urged, pushing the door open. It creaked in protest, but I steeled my nerves. Inside there was darkness, heavy and suffocating. The flickering light above cast shadows that darted across the walls, giving me the unsettling feeling of being watched. "Hello?" I called out, voice trembling. No response, just that echoing giggle from before. The room was filled with beds, their linens long since yellowed and stained. Dust danced in the thin beams of light, sparkling like lost memories. I didn't want to, but I was drawn to one of the beds.
As I approached, a sudden weight pressed on my chest. I glanced at Jenna, who stood frozen at the entrance, and I stepped closer to the figure under the covers. The shadows loomed larger, and my heart raced as I peeled back the blanket. What lay beneath made my breath catch. An old doll, tattered and missing a button eye, just like before. Its mouth was cracked into a half grin, and its fabric skin looked scuffed and sad. My fingers brushed against it, but before I could grasp it, the whispers came to a sudden stop. "Help me," a voice whispered, softer this time, but laced with urgency. "Let's go," Jenna urged, pulling me back. But a strange force held me still as a chill wrapped around my spine. "We can't leave it here," I said, conflicted. "Are you serious?" she hissed. The tension in her voice was palpable. It might be part of it. I hesitated, my heart battling against reason, but the soft plea echoed, cutting through the chaos. There was something almost human beneath the whispers, an essence of desperation that pulled at me. "Stay with me, Jenna." My voice was firm, my resolve hardening. "Aid comes in many forms. If there's a chance we can help." But the moment lingered and turned dark as the oppressive air thickened. Jenna's eyes shouted caution, and behind her the figure loomed, its crooked silhouette drawn into the patchy light. I felt my pulse quicken, desperate to find a way out of this madness. The doll spoke again, cloaked in the familiar melody of that child's giggle. "Help us! Help me!" The walls heaved with despair, as if every breath from the room belonged to something haunting. I knew I had to choose, whether to let go or confront whatever darkness awaited us. "Let's get out, please," Jenna pleaded again. Okay, I agreed, my heart racing as doubts wrestled for dominance. I turned back to the hall, aiming for the exit that had to exist somewhere. We stumbled away from the room. The whispers returned suddenly, filling the silence with a chorus of anguished cries. "Help us! You shouldn't have come back!" They wrapped around my mind. Racing down the dim corridor, I felt the whispers gradually fade into the background, replaced by the steady thrum of my heart. The exit must be close. But as I turned the last corner, my heart sank. The exit door lay before us, but it wouldn't budge, remnants of decay holding it captive. Desperation clawed at me as I pushed against it, but it remained immovable. And then the whispers halted completely, leaving an unsettling silence. A shiver crawled up my spine. The figure would not relent. It loomed ahead, perpetually waiting. "Help us! Let us out!" it echoed. In that instant, it struck me. Was it speaking to us, or was it like the others, trapped in a cycle, yearning to break free? I couldn't tell anymore. The line between reality and insanity blurred. Jenna's hand gripped mine, squeezing hard as she tried to pull me back. "Don't you get it?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "They're caught like us." I could only stare as the figure turned away, revealing rows of trapped souls flickering just below the surface, a kaleidoscope of despair. With newfound resolve, I turned my focus back to the door. Jenna pressed against me, a whisper caught in her throat as we readied ourselves for one last push. "On 3, I said, adrenaline surging through me. 1, 2, 3! We barreled into the door, and with an unexpected force, it flew open, light pouring in, obliterating the shadows behind us. As we tumbled out into the corridor, something shifted in the air, an echo of freedom, yet it lingered with uncertainty. The whispers faded behind us, but an unsettling sense of familiarity followed. I took in the new environment around us. A shattered mirror hung low on the wall, reflected images swirling, faces of the trapped flashing briefly as we escaped. We blinked into the harsh light, but as we stumbled ahead, I heard it again, barely audible but growing clearer, a familiar giggle urging us to stay. We pressed forward, minds swirling with questions that might never find answers, and as the whisper of "help me" faded into the ether, a gnawing sensation settled deep within my chest, nagging me about the shadows we had left behind. In that moment, I understood. Some darkness never truly leaves you, and whatever haunted us would likely follow until we discovered the truth hidden within that old hospital's embrace.